morning. It's day 16 of our Lent Readings for 2022, continuing the books of the New Testament and continuing in 2 Corinthians, which we looked at yesterday. And one of the things we said is that 2 Corinthians contains more biographical information about Paul, the author, than any of his other letters. And partly that's because his authority as an apostle was being challenged by some false teachers, and so Paul uses the evidence of his ministry to support his claim to be able to say the things he does and have the authority he has. And he particularly focuses on his struggles in his ministry. He talks about being in danger, about being in despair, being perplexed, but not crushed or destroyed. He talks about being beaten, being imprisoned, being shipwrecked. He talks about all these persecutions and struggles he has, yet the Lord has been with him through it all. And then in chapter 12, he talks about a thorn in the flesh. A messenger from Satan, as he calls it. And that's what we're going to look at this morning. And we're going to ask the questions, where did it come from? What was it? And why was it given to Paul? So we're going to have a short reading from 2 Corinthians chapter 12 from verse 7. Therefore, in order to keep me from becoming conceited, I was given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me, but he said, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delighted in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties, for when I am weak, then I am strong." So where did this thorn come from? Paul says it was a messenger of Satan. But it was given to stop him being conceited, and that's not something that Satan would want to do. Satan wants to provoke conceit, arrogance, pride and boastfulness in humanity. So it seems strange. These are the sorts of things that God would want to do. And it seems that God has allowed Satan to oppress Paul for God's own purposes. And you might think, well, that's a bit strange. Why would God allow Satan to do something to one of his people? It's because Satan always overreaches himself. Satan effectively thinks he's winning, but is actually defeating himself. And that's not unique to this passage at all. Just think about events around the crucifixion. Satan entered Judas, and in doing so betrayed Jesus. And I'm sure Satan thought that was a victory until the resurrection. And then he realized that Satan had been the instigator of his own downfall. And here, whatever this thorn is, it is actually achieving God's work. So what might it be? Well, we said that it could be of a human origin. We said that Paul was undergoing attacks by false teachers. It could be some sort of human persecution. It says, and the messenger of Satan, the word messenger, angelos, talks of angels and that could mean something demonic, or at least of demonic origin. Some have speculated that it could be an illness. Malaria has been suggested, a common illness at that time. We don't actually know. My own view, I take the view that some have of that it was to do with Paul's eyesight. And I realise I could be biased in this because I have an ophthalmic background, so I naturally gravitate towards that. But my reasoning comes from actually Galatians. Let me just read a couple of short passages from Galatians, which is a book we're going to be doing at the start of next week. In Galatians 4, Paul has been ill, and he says this in Galatians 4 from verse 13. "As you know, it was because of an illness that I was first preached the gospel to you. And even though my illness was a trial to you, you did not treat me with contempt or scorn. Instead, you welcomed me as if I was an angel of God, as if I were Christ Jesus himself. Where then is your blessing of me now? I can testify that if you could have done so, you would have torn out your eyes and given them to me." I think that's just Paul had an eye problem. And then at the end of the book, in Galatians, in chapter 6:11, he says, "See what large letters I use as I write to you with my own hand." I suspect Paul may have had cataracts, and maybe that was it. But reality is, we don't know. What we do know is why it was given. It was given to stop him being conceited, to being proud, to being boastful or arrogant. If you read the few verses before what we read in chapter 12 of 2 Corinthians, Paul talks about being given visions and taken up to the third heaven and revelations which he couldn't even speak of. Paul had received amazing blessings, maybe some of the greatest revelations ever given to humanity by God. That could certainly build someone's ego. You might think an encounter with God would humble you. I think it probably did at the time. But in reflection, when you come to speak of it, it's so hard not to be proud. And so Paul had this thorn, an imperfection of some sort in his ministry that kept him humble. That reminds me of Paul's own words in Philippians, which book we'll look at the end of next week. Philippians 3:10. I want to know Christ. Yes, I want the power of his resurrection and participate in his sufferings, being like him unto death. If you want great blessings from God, you may well get a thorn in the flesh with it, because our hearts are so tempted to be proud and boastful. I guess God has the option. Does he give us nothing, or does he give us both? I'd say we seek him and call on him that he might give us our blessings and that we might accept what comes with it, that we will be humble and not proud and boastful, that would lead us away from the Lord. Remember God's promise to Paul and his promise to us. His grace is sufficient. Till next time, have a blessed day.